Yes, at 6 o'clock on the dot. You want to wait a few seconds? You're welcome. Yes, at 6 o'clock on the dot.
Is it picking up now? Can you all hear me? I don't know if you can hear me because of the microphone or because I'm loud. Microphone? Okay, excellent. All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Rollins Museum of Art. I was going to say the Museum of Biblical Art since I'm talking about biblical art. Before I start the lecture, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered here today on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Seminole and Timucua peoples who have stewarded the land for generations, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. And with that, my name is Ena Heller. I'm the first Beal Director of the museum, and I'm very happy to see you tonight to hear the lecture titled Medieval Bestsellers, Stories, Secrets, and Promises. And I want to preface my lecture by saying, if you have any questions during the time of the lecture, please feel free to bring them up. You don't have to wait until the very end if you have any specific questions or questions. So, as a younger art historian, I spent years first at the Met Cloisters, which is the medieval branch of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, seen here on the right side of the screen, both in the curatorial and the education departments, and then later on, leading the Museum of Biblical Art, also in New York City, on the left of the screen. And during those years, those many years, I became very interested in the relationship between text and image, insofar as the story of religious images are concerned, Judaism and Christianity in particular. And I was curious about the journey of stories, symbols, and meanings from the written page onto the painted or drawn image in Christian religious art, which is what my lecture today will also focus on. Specifically, I was really interested in those stories that were so incredibly popular throughout the centuries of Christian history. And I was interested to discover where some of the details very vivid. The moral lessons, the miracles, the frightening, sometimes boring details were coming from, and why they so captured the imagination of Christians for so many centuries. That background and those kind of research thoughts brought this exhibition here to the Rollins Museum of Art, an exhibition I curated last fall from our permanent collection on the legends of the saints. And some of you were here last fall when I gave a guided tour of the exhibitions. Today, I'm not going to do that. Today, I want to use the exhibition more as a starting point, for a larger conversation that talks about the medieval imagination, talks about the notion of a bestseller in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and the ways in which these stories, be they written or painted, function in everyday life, how they were perceived, what they meant to the people at the time, and how they were interacted with. Clearly very different than the way we interact with them mostly in museums today. So a lot of it hinges upon this gentleman over here. This rather asynchronous presence at the crucifixion of Christ in a fresco that dates to the beginning of the 15th century from Italy. And I say asynchronous because this gentleman by the name of Jacopo de Fazio, but better known as Jacopo de Voragine, lived in the 13th century. But he is given private Christ, witnessing this important moment in Christian history. And what we know about Jacobus was that he was a Dominican, but he was an Italian. He joined the Dominican order as a young man, and then spent his entire life sort of going up the ladder of the Dominican order until one point, very close to his death, about 6 years before he died, he became Archbishop of Genoa, so the highest ranking person there in the church. And we see him here indeed depicted as an archbishop. He's got the vestments that are indicative of the role, the chasuble, the mitre, and the crozier. And what he holds here in his hand is the reason we remember him so many centuries later. And that is the book that he didn't quite write, that we now know as the Golden Legend. When he put it together, he called it simply the Stories of the Saints, but it's come down to us under the name the Golden Legend. And what he did was he really took a number of stories and legends that were circulating in disparate texts and oral tradition at the time in the 14th century and put them together in one book. So he wasn't all that original, but he did make available in one place about 70 stories of the lives of the saints, from the apostles and the early first Christian martyrs in the early centuries to near contemporaries like St. Francis and St. Dominic. And this book became an instant bestseller in the family. The second only to the Bible. And I'll talk about that in just a second. I'm showing you one of the manuscript examples that remain today. This is about 1290, so it's about 30 years or so after he put the book together, which was around 1260. And this is a manuscript that currently is held at the Biblioteca Laurentiana in Florence. And what's interesting is that there are probably close to 800 manuscripts that still exist today of this particular book. And then once the printed press was invented, in the first century, there were something in the neighborhood of 150 editions and translations of the book into all the different languages. And among incunabulae being those books that were printed before 1500, there are more editions of the Golden Legend than there are of the Bible. And a little hard to believe, but this really goes to show how enormously popular this book became in a very short period of time. And so when I say it became a bestseller, what does it mean to be a bestseller in a society with very few books and equally few readers? Now, That 14th century Europe, not so literate. You had to be very lucky to get an education. You have to be mostly clergy or religious figure or very wealthy. So how did this book become so important a part of popular culture and the medieval imagination? And the way it did it was disseminated by means other than reading. So this was something that people would know because these stories would be read out loud in church. They would be integrated into sermons very commonly. They would be played out in the public square and in the spaces, the sacred space of the church, and incorporated into medieval, mystical plays. And they would be importantly painted on the walls of the church, on the windows of the church. So they were in the public consciousness in a way that one would find hard to believe, absent being the direct access to reading. And the reason it became so popular is that for the first time, ordinary people like you and me, had access to these stories, which previously had been only present in liturgical texts, which did not leave the sanctuary of the church and were not in the hands of people. One of the first great interpreters of medieval art, of religious art in medieval France, the art historian Emile Maull, in the early 20th century, wrote about this book, and he said that in the 13th century, I quote, "Men found in this book all that they loved the best, a picture of human life, a summary of the world's history, strange adventures, and wonderful miracles." And we'll see as we go through some of these stories that indeed all those components are present there. And they explain so much of the popularity of the book. Now, some of it is rather fanciful, so much so that even Voragine himself admits that there are certain stories that are not to be believed fully. And one of the stories that he mentions in that context is the story of St. Margaret, which I'm showing you in some wonderful little marginalia, which are illustrations in the margin of the page in illustrated manuscripts in the Middle Ages. And you can see her on the left-hand side. That's the episode that is rather fanciful, where she is being swallowed by a dragon, and then she emerges from the belly of the dragon unhurt. And that's where Voragine says that that part of the story is apocryphal and not to be taken seriously. But importantly, you can see her coming out of the belly there, and she is holding the cross, right, the symbol of her faith, looking at the cross as she emerges unhurt. And that's really important for the message of these images, right? There's a promise there. There's a connection, which I will go back to in just a second, a connection between the strength of one's faith and the promise of redemption. However, this kind of a little hard to believe, more fanciful part of the story of the stories, not just one, is probably one of the reasons why by the time the Renaissance happens, the golden legend loses some of its popularity and some of its appeal. Once, the humanists start coming on the stage, the Renaissance thinkers, somebody like Erasmus of Rotterdam, who was a humanist, but also interestingly a Catholic theologian, he wrote about it, that it's feigned miracles and strange lies, which the farther they are from the truth, the more readily they are believed. So by that point, not so much the bestseller that it was before. People move on to other works and to other doctrine, really, with a rediscovery of antiquity and so forth. However, beyond that aspect that we may take issue with in terms of the realism of the stories, I think what's really important about these stories is that they were captivating mysteries, and they were stories of character, stories of morality, stories of good versus evil, and the power of the Christian faith. And so I sometimes think about them as the murder mysteries of the Middle Ages, and I used to teach it like that when I was in New York, because it is the same part of the imagination, right? Sometimes they're even akin to horror stories today. There's something in us that wants to hear and see that gory torture and detail and whatnot. There's always a happy ending. So they were the superheroes. The saints were the superheroes of the Middle Ages. And I think that's where their extraordinary appeal came from, obviously outside of the, religious part of it. But so everybody, every society is superheroes, and there's always a happy ending. Unfortunately for them, the happy ending in the Legends of the Saints usually happens after death. So, but there's the promise of the better life afterwards. But that in and of itself is important, and I'll get back to that in just a second. So they are, the way these stories read, they were really the medieval page turners. And what's interesting is when Lorenzo put the book together, he didn't put these stories in chronological order, as you would kind of figure, or perhaps alphabetical order. Now, they are arranged by the order of the liturgical year and when the saints' feasts fall on, which really tells us something about how the book was written. It wasn't going to be taken into my library and I'm for St. Catherine, so I don't ever see, or under the 4th century. But they were read as the liturgical year went by. So you would start with the saints that are celebrated in January and kind of go down from there. So what I want to do is go through a few of these stories just to talk about the sort of narrative arc, which is very similar in a lot of these stories. There's, the essence of the important episodes of the stories that get repeated a lot, but in very different ways. And I wanted to start with a saint who is represented in one of the paintings in our exhibition next door. And I'm going to be talking about this lady right here, St. Catherine, which is seen here very in proximity, very close to the Virgin and Child, and she is reaching out to the Christ Child. But I want to show this by means of narrative paintings, by means of a cycle of paintings by Mazzolino da Pancalli, who was an early Renaissance painter, who also worked famously alongside Masaccio in the Brancacci Chapel in Florence. The Brancacci Chapel in Florence being the first narrative cycle that's considered fully of the Renaissance when the style turns over. But this is a different chapel in the Church of San Clemente in Rome, and it is a whole series of frescoes dedicated to the life of St. Catherine. So St. Catherine, completely fictional character, but supposedly she lived in the 4th century, or late 3rd, early 4th century, during the reign of the Roman Emperor Maxentius. And this is the time when Christianity was still illegal in the Roman Empire. So Maxentius was one of actually the last emperor to really persecute the Christians en masse, because the emperor right after him, Constantine, was the one who in 313, with the Edict of Milan, made Christianity one of the official religions of the Roman Empire. This is the time when still, being a Christian was something that would bring you death very often. The story goes that she, Catherine, was the daughter of the king of Cyprus. That's what the Golden Legend says. Other tellings of the story place her as the daughter of the governor of Alexandria. But anyway, the point about her is that as a very young woman, she was fully learned. She was trained in all the liberal arts. She was extremely eloquent, was a master of logic. And so, her renown kind of gets around, gets to the emperor, and he gets curious about this very young lady who has all these skills and these kind of scholarly pursuits. And what he does is he calls to the court all his masters of logic and rhetoric and all the scholars of the time, and to debate with her. And this is what you see here in this scene right here. You see the young St. Catherine in the center, surrounded by this much older men who are a little bewildered and a little upset because she refutes every argument that they bring forth. And not only does she argue so much more eloquently and convincingly and kind of refutes every point that they bring up, but in the process, she also manages to convince them to convert to Christianity. And as a result, because as I said, being a Christian was not really something that the emperor liked, as a result, they are all burnt at the stake. So you see this kind of secondary scene right here in a separate space. It's a collective state here, and the St. Catherine is with them praying while they, you know, when they're praying for the salvation of their souls, which obviously it is assured since they've already converted. So at this point, the emperor is really intrigued, you know, that she managed to do this piece of intellect. And so he offers her a place in the palace. But of course, provided that she renounces her Christian faith, which of course she doesn't want to do because, quote, I have given myself to Christ. And this is Catherine here refusing to worship the pagan idols. And so when that happens, the emperor throws her in prison in a small dark cell for about 12 days without any food or water. And during that time, instead of starving, she is being fed by angels, or in different versions, she's being fed by a dove sent by Christ. But the point is that at the end of the 12 days, she reemerges more resplendent than ever. Now, also during the time that she's in prison, you can see the narrative detail, you know, and sort of the crescendo of what's happening. So during the time in prison, she is visited by circa 200 people from the court, around the court, again, who had heard about her encounter with the scholars, heard about her wisdom, her faith, and every one of them comes and talks to her and then converts to Christianity. Bad thing is that the Empress herself makes it there, and here she is. This is the Empress talking to St. Catherine in prison, and the Empress herself converts, and as a result, she is beheaded. And here you can see a very interesting sort of secondary detail or subsequent scene, I should say. There's an angel taking the soul of the Empress in the form of a baby and bringing the soul to heaven. So again, that is the promise of the Christian faith, right? You will get to heaven. So finally, this happens. Maxentius is really mad, doesn't know what else to do, so he convicts her to death. And he orders these 4 very large wooden wheels with studded nails and studded iron saws and iron nails on them to be made so she can be torn apart on the wheel. And that's why very often when you see individual representations of St. Catherine, not inside the story, she will be holding a wheel. That's her attribute. But before this can happen, as you can see here again in the fresco, an angel comes down from heaven and shatters the wheels, all 4 of them, and in the process also manages to kill 4,000 pagans. So I think you can see them here sort of kind of trying to run away, but to not fail. The emperor's up here watching all of this in disbelief. So then eventually, without having any other recourse, he has her beheaded. And that is some of that sort of art of the story that repeats in a lot of these legends. It's the idea is that their faith is so strong that it allows them to suffer all kinds of horrible torture without dying or without feeling pain. And then eventually, you know, when other types of torture fail, they will be beheaded. St. Catherine became extraordinarily popular in the Middle Ages, particularly so after in the 9th century it was said that angels found her body or brought her body from, I suppose, Alexandria to Mount Sinai. And that's where the famous monastery of St. Catherine that you may have heard about was founded. And she becomes extremely popular after the 9th century, especially in England and France. It is said that Joan of Arc invoked her when she was being birthed in the state. And of course, she becomes patron saint of any number of things, among them all students and scholars, because of her wisdom and of her training early on, as well as the clergy, and also the patron saint of young girls who in Europe, and to this day, there's still in certain countries, there's a habit of putting wreaths of flowers on the statue representing St. Catherine on her feast day. So, going back to the Golden Legend, as you can see, it is very important material for art, because when artists are confronted with not just showing the representation of a saint, but rather depicting in detail the legend, the story, they need that type of detail, which is not found elsewhere. And what's interesting is that that happens not only for saints who lived any number of centuries after the time when the books of the Bible were compiled, but it happens even in the case of characters that are central to the story, to the Christian story, such as, for instance, the Virgin Mary. And I'm starting again with a painting that is included in our exhibition. This is the Visitation by Francesca de Mira from our collection. And what's really interesting about Mary is that when it comes to depicting the life of the Virgin Mary, the Bible gives us almost nothing. You would think that it does, but it doesn't. Chronologically, the earliest mention of the Virgin Mary in the Christian Bible is Annunciation, is when the angel comes down and tells her that she will bear God's child. And as you probably know, or some of you know, only the Gospel of Luke, one of the 4 Gospels, even treats the subject of the birth and infancy of Christ. So in the other than Luke, in the other 3 Gospels, Mary is mentioned only 8 times. And one time in the Acts of the Apostles. So not a whole lot of material for somebody who wants to depict the story of the life of the Virgin. And so here other texts start coming to the rescue very early on in the 1st and 3rd century, so around the time that the books of the Bible, the Christian Bible, were being written. There were any number of other books that we now consider or term the Apocrypha. And the Apocrypha are a number of texts written generally between the 1st and 3rd century, related to the New Testament, but that did not make it into the canonical Bible. That the fathers of the church, especially St. Jerome, when they decided what goes in and what stays out, these titles or these books stayed out, and the 4, Gospels, as we know, that the Acts, et cetera, made it into the official Bible. I'm not going to discuss the doctrinal implications or relationships between these books, because it is not something that I am qualified to do. But the reason I brought these texts up is because they are extraordinarily important for art. They become a tremendous source of inspiration in the early centuries of Christianity, when Christian art was just being born. And these details were so important to add to the story and provide these images that were, again, as I said before, the sort of visual version of texts that people did not have access to because they were largely illiterate. And so there was one of these infancy gospels, as they are called, the Proto-Evangelium of James, has a whole chapter, or talks in length about the life of the Virgin Mary prior to her becoming Christ's mother. And I'm showing you a couple of pictures from a very famous narrative fresco cycle by Giotto in the Arena Chapel in Padua, just a little outside of Venice. This is a cycle that was painted. It's the life of Christ and the life of Mary in a small private chapel that belonged to the Scrovegni family, and it's painted in the very beginning of the 14th century, circa 1305-06. A fresco cycle that is considered by many the first work of the Renaissance, although it's a century before the Renaissance proper. And here you see the birth of the Virgin Mary, and if we look at the text of the Proto-Evangelium of James, it says that Anna gave birth, and you can see her here in the bed, and asked what she had. She was told she had a daughter. She purified herself, gave suck to the child, and named her. So that's all the Proto-Evangelium says about the birth of Mary. But then 10 centuries later, 12 centuries later, really, the Golden Legend comes along and adds more detail. And there's actually a whole chapter in the Golden Legend dedicated to the birth of Blessed Virgin Mary, and gives a lot more details. And some of the details are incorporated here in Giotto's fresco. It talks about the nursemaid that takes the baby and gives it a bath, gives her a bath, and then swaddles her, and then talks about the visitors who come and bear gifts, which was a very common custom in 14th, 15th century Italy. You would bring all kinds of gifts to the new mother and to the baby. And also the same story gives us details about the later life of Mary, as well as the life of Joachim and Anna, her parents, before she was born. Here we see her being presented into the temple, sort of an early parallel to the Christ's presentation, Jesus' presentation in the temple. And then, of course, her marriage to Joseph, after he'd been told by an angel in his sleep that it was okay to marry her because she would bear God's son. So all these details that add a narrative and also a relatability to these characters, which I will talk a little bit more in just a second. So moving right along, the later life of Mary, of course, is very tied to the adult life of Christ, and particularly to his passion. And so we see her often in images such as this one. This is also from Giotto's cycle at the Arena Chapel, present at the crucifixion. And yet, even when we look at images that concern the Passion of Christ, obviously a part of the Christian story that is more detailed in all four of the Gospels, and that is central, right, to the Christian faith, it comes as a surprise, or it came to me at the time as a surprise, that there are any number of scenes that are so part and parcel of the Christian story and of Christian iconography that are actually not mentioned anywhere in the Bible. One of the most interesting stories of that type scenes of that type is what we today refer to as the Pietà. So the Pietà, obviously, and I'm showing you the most iconic of them all, Michelangelo's Pietà in the Church of St. Peter at the Vatican, that he created when he was all of 24 years old. A beautiful marble sculpture. And what it is, it's the Virgin Mary cradling the body of her dead son after he's been taken down from the cross. And what is the two really interesting things, kind of surprising things about the Pietà. One, as I said, is although it fits so well into the biblical narrative, you can totally see as you read through, he was crucified, he's taken down from the cross, his mother is present there. You would think that she would try to embrace him and mourn his loss. The Bible doesn't say anything about it. The Bible says Joseph of Arimathea took the body down from the cross and buried him in his tomb. And so although you think it fits really well, it's not there. And then the other thing, as an art historian, it's just so much a part of the vocabulary of forms of Christian art that you would think it had been depicted from the very early from the beginning of Christian art from the early centuries. And yet, this iconography, the theme of the Pietà, does not appear until the 14th century. And although we know it by the Italian name, which I think is because of Michelangelo, the very first Pietàs appear in Germany. And they appear in sculptural form before they are painted. So the earliest sculpture of Pietà that we know dates from about 1298, so it's literally the last years of the 13th century. Comes from Germany. This is a little bit later. This is from around 1375, and it's in the collection of the cloisters where I used to work. So I used to look at this a lot in the galleries. It's their earliest Pietà in the collection. And it's very typical of that initial 14th century style of these sculptures where they're mostly wooden, and often they are polychrome, as this one is, but the paint is still very awkward. This is not yet the time when realism in depicting emotion was very much a part of the vocabulary of art. So she's a little awkward in her paint, a little stiff. And the body of Jesus is small, very small. It's like a child. And although he doesn't look like a child, right? He's more like a miniature adult, but the size of him is not the size of an adult. And that refers to mystical writings from the Middle Ages that talk about how Mary in her pain took him in her arms and imagined that he was a baby. And it is these mystical writings that are the initial source for this particular scene represented in art. Particularly the writings of Saint Bridget of Sweden. And this is her writings are part of another category of medieval writings. A lot of people recorded visions of the saints, visions of the Virgin Mary, and they were recorded in these mystical writings. And a lot of them focused on contemplation of the passion, of the suffering. And this is really interesting because it connects with shifts in devotional practices at the time. This is the time when, for lack of a better expression, religion becomes more personal. This is when people want to identify more closely with the divine figures. They want to experience that pain or relate to that pain. And so Saint Bridget, she was a noble lady from Sweden, married, about 8 children. With her husband, they did the pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, one of the most important pilgrimage sites in Europe. And then her husband dies, and she dedicates her life to religion. She becomes a nun. She takes the habit and founds a monastery, a female monastery within the Augustinian order. So then she goes to Rome to get approval for that, and then lives in Rome for the rest of her life. During the time that she lived in Rome, she made many pilgrimages, several of them, which was really hard at the time, if you think about it. This is in the 14th century, several of which to the Holy Land. And it is while she goes to the Holy Land and visits the holy sites that she says she saw and heard a vision of the Virgin Mary, telling her sort of step by step the experience that she, the Virgin Mary, had when Christ was crucified. So it's the mother relating her experience and her pain. And these are recorded by contemporaries of St. Bridget. And it's interesting because it ties into, in general, a multiplication of scenes of suffering, of lamentation, that, as I said, connects not only with that desire to relate more closely to the divine figures, but also it relates to what was going on in Europe. Not a great time to live, right? The Black Death in 1348 decimated the population of Europe. About half of the population of Europe disappeared in that one plague alone. And then there's another plague, and there's another plague. Infant mortality, forget it. Life expectancy very short. Life was hard. Life was really hard. And for people at the time to know that their God, that Christ, that the Virgin Mary suffered so real a suffering and so close to what they're going through was a comfort. And so the prayer is really to get close to that and to understand that just the way that they had suffered and made it through, so too we can. And again, that the promise is, of course, the better life in the afterlife. Now, one of the most interesting texts among these medieval meditation was the so-called Meditations on the Life of Christ. And I'm showing you here a very interesting work of art. This is the Sign Lifted. It's these were individual little miniatures, and they're really tiny. They're about an inch, 2 inches by 2.5 inches each. There's 72 of them in all. I'm sorry, 64 of them in all, and there's 16 placed on paper and then on these wooden panels. There's 4 of them, and they detail the life of Christ and the life of Mary. It's a very unusual format. We don't see it much elsewhere. So people have hypothesized that they had been initially in a prayer book, and then they were cut and reassembled on these wooden panels at a later time. We don't know. They arrived this way at the Walters some time ago, and they're really wonderful because they're very clearly based on that detailed text of the Meditations of the Life of Christ. That really kind of what it is, it's a life of Christ in a meditative form, helping the reader at every step to relate to contemplate, to identify with the protagonists of the form, helping the reader to return in the area of intuition. And so what is of interest to us is this second panel, which starts Evidence of Question. And if you look at some details, what's really interesting is the multiplication of the Caesars, the Lamentation. So you start again, the Bible says, "Took down from the cross, buried in the tomb." And but here you can see that, the taking down from the cross, Joseph, Aaron, here, everybody else. And then there's the Lamentation proper, right? This is the scene that's closest to the Pietà when she embraces her son. But then as they prepare to take him to the tomb, there's another continuation of that lamentation, and then even the entombment is another moment, another sorrowful moment for the Virgin, and then as they leave the tomb, the sorrowful procession, and then finally the final image, which is sort of outside of the narrative, that's the so-called Mater Dolorosa, the sorrowful mother, which is a more sort of abstract meditative. But you can think about following these images and relating to every one of them. So it was that idea of the suffering, which is paralleled by our suffering in this world, and the secret and the promise in the title of my lecture today. The secret is really the strength of the faith, right? That's your secret weapon as you go through life. The promise, of course, is the afterlife. Now, since I've depressed you enough, I'm going to move into something slightly less depressing and just two different details. So there are other details in the Meditations of the Life of Christ that embellish and enrich the story. It's not all just the suffering. And one of them, which is very often depicted in art, starting with the 14th century on, is this detail. So this is obviously the adoration of the Magi, and this is a manuscript that is currently at the Snipes Museum at the University of Notre Dame, and it dates from about the middle of the 14th century from Bologna. And so if you look at the Gospel of I'm sorry, I lost my place here. The gospel just says, the Magi came and adored the baby and gave their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and then they presented that to him. But the Meditations of the Life of Christ adds this detail with the older mothers kissing the foot of the baby Jesus, and you can see that a lot in the representations. And the text goes a little bit further and says, "Then they reverently and devoutly kissed his feet. This wisdom-filled boy also stretched out his hand to them to be kissed, to give them greater solace and to strengthen them in his love. He made a sign of the cross and blessed them as well." Well, in that part, he's trying to make a sign of the cross, I think. I'm not entirely sure. But I want to, emphasize to give them greater solace and to strengthen them in his love. It's again that personal relationship, which if you think about it historically, another 2 centuries, and that's going to be part of the Reformation, that personal relationship. But I want to end on a very happy note, and to say that humor is not entirely absent from these stories. This is another manuscript of the Meditations on the Life of Christ. It's fully illustrated. It's a wonderful manuscript that is now in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. But it was created in Tuscany, probably the area around Pisa, in the middle of the 14th century. And so what these 2 pages show, so here's Christ, and he'd just been in the desert fasting for 40 days. So he's starving. So the angels come to him and say, at the end of this ordeal, what would you like to eat? And Christ, as any good Italian boy, says, go to my mom, because I would rather eat something that she's cooked than anything else. And so it gets better. So here's the angels, they come over to Mary and Joseph standing out at the house here. And she's giving them some pasta and some what, anything you like, good lunch, Chianti. And Jesus is having a wonderful picnic here in the desert on a nice little serviette. And then this comes the part that really cracks me up every single time, because then he sends them back to Mary with the dirty dishes. That is so tough, right? I have friends when I lived in Italy 20 years ago, and they were grown people, especially grown men, I should say, my age. And some of them lived at home, some of them didn't live at home, but they always took the laundry home. There's perfect laundromats in Florence, but so I just thought that was, so wonderful that this detail was incorporated in the manuscript. And what really what the detail shows is that the importance, ultimately, if you strip everything else that I've said today down, and you forget everything that I've said, the one thing to remember, and I think this illustrates it quite wonderfully, is that these images help people place the stories within the context of the images. And that's why they're such a powerful force in popular culture and in popular visual culture, which is completely different than today, right? The different visual society. Images then were few and hard to come by, and so perhaps their impact was all greater. But the fact that they brought these sacred stories close to our own experiences, and they saw their own experiences mirrored in the experience of the saints, brought not only solace, but brought hope. And I think hope is basically, one of the most important feelings that one has to have in life, especially through hard times, and the medieval times were often hard. So I want to leave you with this, and to say that this all relates to the way that I relate to art today, and probably the reason that I've chosen art as my profession, because it does bring that hope into our lives. It brings happiness, it brings solace, it brings beauty, and often it brings healing. So thank you very much for your attention, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Because religion was such an enormous segment of middle-aged life, I was wondering, I almost get the impression there wasn't any other art done during that period. That can't be right, but something was.
You're almost right. Not fully, but almost.
I was wondering, I almost get the impression.
Reality art,
the
19th century, was that art was done on commission, right? Artists did not have their studio and create it and then, showed it at fairs. So art was only done on commission, and up until the Enlightenment, for sure, the single greatest patron of art was the church. I'm talking about Europe now, of course, not. So the Christian church was the most important patron of the arts. So if you were an artist, chances were that you would paint religious or sculpt religious art. The other aspect of art that was not religion would have had to do with portraiture.
With what?
Portraiture. So the aristocrats, the royalty, the wealthy people of Europe would commission their portraits, and not so much you and me. So you had to be of a certain class and of a certain wealth to have your portrait painted. And then, landscapes start appearing, give or take, in the early Renaissance. And then other genres appear, but yes, the religious art was predominantly the most important form of art that was done during those centuries. There was some other secular frescoes, sometimes in a palace here or there, And then as we approach the period of the Renaissance, mythology creeps in, so antique motifs and themes, but by and large, religious art was it. Yes.
Was Catherine a doctor of the church?
She was not.
She was
We
not.
don't have female doctors of the church.
She should have.
Well, thank you. That's what I think. Just like Mary Magdalene was one of the disciples of Christ, her gospel should have gone into the canon, but the fathers of the church were not so progressive, let's say, in the 4th century, and so she was not. Yes.
The point you made about Michelangelo pickup and the connection that you made about the figures that are not present there. And the fact that usually it is Saint Joseph of Arimathea who is the one who deposes the Christ. In most paintings of the deposition, if Mary is present with the other two Marys, they're always in the background. The one who deposes the Christ. In most paintings of the deposition, if Mary is present with the other two Marys, they're always in the background. She had not been made one of the characters. She was there, but behind somebody else.
Well, he was one of the first I think conceptually, you're absolutely right. Because there's what we also see towards the end of the Middle Ages is Mary becomes larger in the story. Joseph, not Arimathea, but Joseph, her husband, becomes much larger in the story. And that's another lovely story where there's some paintings of the cloisters that speak to that specifically. So I think a lot of other figures are made more prominent in the story, in the Christian story more generally. And for Mary herself, yes, I believe that's very much the case.
Yeah. The irony in Catholic religion is that Mary, who was put aside for such a long time, the more the Catholics Mary, who was put aside for such a long
What were the motives of the church in commissioning art to such a great extent? It must have been a costly investment, even at that time. What was behind it, or what were the motives behind that?
So there are two main sort of reasons, one of which is a little debated in art history, but I hinted at it when I talk about these images making the stories come alive for those who could read. There's a very famous quote from St. Gregory the Great, who said that the images were the Bible of the poor. And there's a whole faction in art history that says that was not true, but we're not going to go there. So I think part of it was to interpret the sacred scriptures, but probably more importantly, even more important from the point of view of the church, was embellishing the house of God, right? So the church is the house of God, is where the sacred, the sacrament happens, and so nothing is too good for the house of God. It's the most important building. So the church is the house, civic building as well as religious building in towns and cities, and so no expense would be spared to beautify the house. That's where the money would go.
And the Counter-Reformation?
Well, first comes the Reformation, between the Counter-Reformation, and the Reformation was a reaction against the excesses of the Catholic Church. On the one hand, on the other hand, it was an effort to create a more personal relationship, right, with Christ and God. And so they rejected images to a very large extent, destroying certain parts of Europe, a lot of the art that had been created before. And then the Counter-Reformation was the comeback of the Catholic Church.
But wasn't that a time when they did a lot of art?
Oh, yeah.
To help
Oh,
support
the Counter-Reformation, sure. That's when Baroque art comes in. Yes, John?
Yeah, so I'm just really struck by the beginning of your talk. We talked about it, the cyclical nature of the stories, and how it's in a certain sense, like you've read one Saints, like you kind of read them all, because it's just following a pattern in its template, and you like it. It's like a murder mystery, which I think is so accurate and true. And when you read a Saints like after you've read one or heard one or two or three, you're not reading them or listening to them like, I wonder if she's going to die, because you already know the answer to that question. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about having them be part of the liturgical cycle or part of the canon that you would hear them over and over and over again. What is that? What's the effect of that repetition of hearing essentially kind of like versions of the same story again, or seeing images that depict similar amounts of suffering again?
Oh, I think that's a really good point, because it's reinforcing the message. Right? I think it's in a way it's the equivalent of a mantra, right? The more you hear it in different circumstances and contexts, the more it is and you have to present them in a way that everybody understands them and relates to them. So I really think that was a very good part of it, because the overarching message is, dedicate your life to God and all will be well. And also importantly, I think when you look at the legends of the saints, covers such a large chronological period of the 12 centuries. The other message is that it doesn't matter when it's right. So already in 1260, when Oragene was putting his legends together, it was the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. Now, the Orthodox Church has its own sayings, some of whom are the same, some of whom are different. So the tradition sort of grew differently over there. And as far as I know, there is no equivalent to the Golden Legend for the Orthodox Church. But I don't know for sure because I've gone to all these through art history. So I've read all these books, including the Golden Legend and the Bible when I was in graduate school, basically. So I wasn't studying, Eastern art or religion at that time. So I don't know. I don't think there was any.
And you would think the same principles of art, redemption, would carry through regardless.
Oh, but they do, absolutely. And if you look at, Eastern European art, Orthodox art, so in Romania, for instance, we have these fabulous churches which are on the UNESCO list that have frescoes not only on the inside but also on the outside, from the early 16th century. And the stories are the same. The promise is the same. The function and the meaning of Christian iconography is absolutely the same between Catholic and Orthodox. It's the same faith, but there are certain differences. Yes.
What do you make of the meeting of Pope and the head of the Orthodox Church? They actually sat down. Check years and not done that.
I mean, good for them, Nice, okay, let me just be a little more polite there. Nice sign of progress. Is that going to mean anything? No, there's already a millennia, right, since those two churches are separated. I'm not a theologian. I'm not going to comment on, why do we have so many different Christian religions? It's all one religion, but I don't know. I think these things are so set in their ways that, it's nice when they talk to one another as opposed to killing one another, which has also been the case for centuries. But I'm not sure that's going to have any direct impact. All right, well, thank you so much, everybody.